I had been over to like the Jenner's house for lunch a few times, like pitching Kylie and Kendall and having lunch with Chris, the mom, and
Crazy.
they were tied into their camp.
Cool. Well, everyone, welcome back to, I guess it's now episode 10, part 2 of Shane Bills. And as we kind of transition into last episode to this episode, obviously it's a different day, but it got so juicy.
New fit.
What, sorry?
New fits.
Yeah, new
right?
fits. We're swagged out again. But I feel like there was so much meat that you had, even just in your timeline of, like, I feel like your timeline alone could be like a 4-hour podcast of everything that you've been doing and everything you've been through. I was telling people at the Grit yesterday, I was like, you were just walking by, I'm like, you guys have no clue what this man, I'm like, everything from like even just the fact that you were living below a Michelin star restaurant, just like little things like that are so cool that you were one of the first people to have Shake Shack and all of this. But we started to get into just like your stories of not just like hard skills within the business world, but a lot of your soft skills, which like I feel like a lot of people that will more relate to your soft skills because no one's been to Harvard, you know what I mean? And so we were talking about your relationships and your networking, and we got into like, I've heard especially that you've had relationships with like Justin Bieber, and anyone like back home, especially listening to this, knows how much I like love Justin Bieber and like love
You're
his
a
music.
believer.
I'm a believer through and through. I did like a dance production in grade 7, dancing to Baby, like all of these things. Like,
That's amazing.
I love him. And so I wanted to first ask about that story.
Yeah.
Especially for me, I want to hear that. And I think a lot of people, especially Canadian listeners, will be like, whoa.
Yeah, sure. So I think, we talked about last time some of the people that we were working with. We had the relationship with Steph Curry kind of right off the bat. So he was promoting the app on a monthly basis. And this is 2016, and in 2016
was that all you asked him to do? Was just, hey, can you just promote?
Yeah, so he invested in the company.
Okay.
Because with each one of these guys, we wanted the investment more than anything because we wanted them to care about whether this worked, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when they're personally invested, it goes a lot further.
It goes
right?
way further, yeah.
And they're willing to do things sometimes that are out of contract, and you can ask them at the drop of a hat, hey, this thing happened. Could you maybe post about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we were seeing such incredible movement. Every time Steph would get on and talk about Bubble, we would literally see tens of thousands of downloads. And so it was wild. I mean,
it was actually helping the business.
It was actually
It wasn't just for clout.
That's
right.
Just, actually helping the business. And that's what it was all. It was all geared towards. And then the relationships were the ice cream on top. He happened to be this incredible guy who was amazing to work with, who I learned a lot from. But, when we rewind the clock, when this is 2016, at that time, there was really no one bigger in the world than Justin Bieber. And so he was at the top of my list of like, okay, who could like really move the needle, and who could like, drive the type of downloads that we're really looking for.
Were you even like, when you kind of were like a Justin Bieber, were you even thinking that you even had a chance? Like, was that even?
Yeah,
I
think by this time, I actually did, because his, I had been over to like the Jenner's house for lunch a few times, like pitching Kylie and Kendall and having lunch with Chris, the mom. And
Crazy.
They were tied into their camp. And then, with Bruno Mars, his agent invested too. So we were working on a deal with Bruno Mars at the same time. So these circles are so small that I felt like, there was a shot. Although, I had also had the experience of like, I flew out to New York and was pitching Taylor Swift's camp, and just didn't really get anywhere there.
Nothing.
Right. It was just, I felt like we were just kind of white noise. And so a lot of it is at the end of the day, luck. I mean, sometimes you get that opportunity and you've got to be like right there for the opportunity. But other
Did you
times
get to
you don't
pitch
really.
Taylor Swift? Like,
no, I didn't. I never met Taylor. But met with her team in New York, I think twice.
And for them,
Yeah.
you don't have to answer this if it's kind of weird, but what kind of like money are we talking as far as what they're investing?
Yeah,
Like the
this
kind of
was
money that
also,
they would put
yeah,
in?
that's interesting. So we they would usually do whatever contract for shares in the company. And
Mm-hmm.
so, or they would put their own money to work and put that into the company.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it was a big range, anywhere from like 100,000 to, a couple million, but there's a range there on what kind of size of investments we were taking at the time.
And it
What was
for
crazy about this time though was like, this was like when Instagram was really sort of ramping up. And so what people were asking for an individual post was outlandish. I mean, I think now the market sort of corrected itself a little bit, but I remember at the time, like Kylie Jenner was, I think she said she was getting $1 million a post or something like that. So, um,
for like random brands.
yeah, exactly, for like a random brand. And like I said, this was in the Wild West early on, 2015, 2016, 2017. But that has since kind of corrected itself, and the market knows what it should pay um, for for promotion of a product and what it shouldn't pay. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, Justin was at the top of the list, and I originally got a meeting with Scooter. I pitched his team. There was a member of his team that he kind of used to screen everyone. Her name was Jackie. Jackie had a really cool backstory because she early on ran I guess there was something called the Bieber Army, that was this fan group, and she was like just super scrappy as like a 14, 15, 16 year old, ran this Bieber Army. And then
Was she
Scooter,
she was part of the
yeah, she
team,
was part
like
of Scooter's
integrated.
team. Yeah, Scooter projects. And
She got paid from Scooter and like
yeah,
she just to do
exactly.
that,
Yeah,
which I
exactly.
actually think it's still a thing, isn't it? Bieber,
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
it's on Instagram.
What, the Bieber
Bieber
Army?
Army.
I don't know. I assume that it's still a
I think
thing. I don't.
I actually think I
Yeah,
have seen something about a Bieber. Yeah, that's wow.
yeah.
Okay.
And so I met with her first, and she really liked it, and she was kind of a gatekeeper because she was young, she was really active, and you know knew kind of what was cool,
Pop
what was coming
culture and
up.
that
and
kind of thing. Yeah.
and we had this app Bubble, that actually the nuance was that it would, you could follow a celebrity, and that celebrity would have, if they wanted to, could jump into your group chat at some point, right?
Whoa.
And so with Steph, it was super fun because he's blowing up, having this amazing season. And he would post and be like, "Hey, tomorrow I'm going to drop in a couple of group chats." And he would literally drop into, like, it was like a fantasy football. I remember there was this one that was like a fantasy football group, just a group, right? A group of guys. They all went to like West Virginia University together.
Mm-hmm.
And he dropped in, and people are like,
Out of
this
nowhere,
is
just drop
happening,
in.
like
Yeah, yeah. I'm
what's
in a group
going
chat
on?
with.
Like all of a sudden I am talking with Steph Curry, and it
Is this
just
the
like,
app? That's his bub. Like
yeah,
dropping in.
this was Bubble, which became Pronto.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this super really cool experience that we enabled. um yeah, and so there was actually like a cool way for these guys to also connect with their fan base. So I met with Jackie, I think once or twice. She recommended a Scooter that we sit down, and so I flew out.
That's crazy. So you met with like a 15, 16-year old.
She wasn't 15 or 16 at the time.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
okay.
that's how she got on Scooter's radar
Was when she was
originally.
15.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right.
I was like, whoa, that's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
crazy.
No,
Okay.
she's got this big Hollywood job, and
Okay. Okay.
and that went well. So I flew out to meet with Scooter. The meeting went really well. I'll never forget. I walked in Scooter's office, and he's literally on the phone with Kanye because he was representing Kanye at the time, and he was telling me about the interaction. But I was like, oh wow, this is like big leagues,
This is
right?
real.
So
It
when
is.
you meet with someone like that, it's like, okay, this guy represents like A+ brands, and so
Mm-hmm.
um, everything just had to be really dialed. And I had a presentation that I walked him through, did a demo. He thought it was pretty cool. And so he's like, "Yeah, let's stay in touch." And then he reaches out and he said, "Hey, why don't you fly out to London, and let's talk about a deal. What a deal would look like."
So that's weird. What curious question. Why would they have that happen? Like, what's the logistics of like?
Yeah.
Why didn't he just sit down with you and go, "Hey, tell me about it now"? Like, what was the come out to London? What was that
Yeah,
kind of?
good question. I think he was also wanted time to do his own due diligence, right? So he was probably making some calls. I know I ended up hearing like, oh, I talked to Chris Jenner and she told me about your guys' meeting. So like he was plugged in and doing his own
And doing his
diligence
own
on
thing. Okay.
me as an individual. Like I don't know this guy.
Mm-hmm.
I can see his resume, but I still want to make sure he checks out and make sure this business checks out. And then I think that there's also just like an interpersonal aspect, kind of plucking you outside the office and see, okay, what do you like in real life? I can see how you present. I can see, and I think this is a learning for all of us, right? Um, to make sure that we are kind of the same person, or that we're not just putting on a face here, and that we're a total train wreck as soon as
Mm-hmm.
you know, we hang out outside of a business
Do you think
setting.
that's a common, like, as you get into heavier deals with a lot of money, is that like a very common practice in the business world, is to try to
For
see them
sure.
throughout personal
For
life and
sure. I think, with any business and having raised a lot of money for different projects, you're selling yourself first and foremost. I mean, yeah, I know that's something you've talked about being on
hmm
the doors. You are the product. You're the first product that they have to buy. And once they buy you, then they're open to buying other
buying
things,
other
right?
things.
But you have to be, and it's everything that comes into that, like your integrity, how you treat
Do
people.
they teach that? Like, I know you can't teach it, but like, is there classes or techniques or certain like skills that you can apply like in Harvard? Did they teach any of that, like soft things, or not really soft skills,
Yeah,
or
I mean, there wasn't as much soft skill training
which
at
makes
Harvard, to
sense.
be
Yeah.
honest. And I think even if there was, it would probably come across as pretty rigid or
Rigid.
robotic.
Yeah.
You've got to come to a place where you're integrating these soft skills into your life in a way where they actually feel integrated, right? Where
Yeah.
you're not just like regurgitating something you saw on a podcast,
And it's only
but you're
really
living it,
you
right?
only learn probably through experience of the soft. Like you only learn
Totally.
through like failing, talking to this person. Okay, now that you know.
Totally. I mean, looking back, especially, when it comes to this story, and I'll talk a little bit about it in a second, but I feel like my one of the happy accidents was just that I wasn't super struck by celebrity. And so as such, and I'm married to someone who is literally the best person I've ever met in my life. And she's the type of person that doesn't care if you are homeless or a celebrity. She's literally going to treat you the same way.
Exact same way.
And being around her for so many years,
Wow.
I picked up on a lot of that. And so when Justin, when we're in, when we are in London
Mm-hmm.
out at a club after one of the O2 shows, and he sees that I'm treating his bodyguard the same way that I would treat him, that was attractive. And that actually is what, I think enabled our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Because I go out there and it seemed, it was pretty apparent that it was going to be difficult to get time with him, that Scooter probably just wanted to do the deal, with us. And understandably so, right? He can't like introduce everyone to Justin and make sure everyone gets time, and because
Well, I
if
remember we talked at your
yeah,
son's football game. Everyone at this time had hands in Justin
totally.
Bieber's life, like trying to get in some way, shape, or form.
For sure. And I felt that really early, especially with a guy like him, where it just seemed like everyone had their hands in his pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And um, during our first conversation, it actually, we didn't end up really formally meeting in London. We like hung out at a couple clubs after shows and
Yeah.
stuff. And we had seen each other in like a prayer circle here and
Yeah,
there.
tell me about that. So we
Yeah.
we kind of got into it a little bit. Go
Yeah.
kind of through the story of like you got to
Yeah, so
London.
I get to
Yeah.
London, the show that night. I show up. I'm like not really sure who to hang with because Scooter's really busy, kind of running in between different people that he's hosting. One of the guys that he's hosting um, is David Beckham, and we sort of get rushed. And I just find myself, we're in this like pre-show prayer circle,
Mm-hmm.
and I've got my arm around David Beckham
So
on one
crazy.
side with his kids, and he was such a wonderful gentleman, and as backup dancers. And it was just sort of like this weird moment where I was like, wow, I'm like here in the circle, and even though I'm like in the circle, I still don't know this guy, and I
Mm-hmm.
still like haven't had a chance to get to know him. And so he does 4 shows in London. And I think after the second night, we went out to a club. We were just kind of hanging out adjacent, didn't really get to know him. Night 3, night 4, I'll tell you, there was one night that was hilarious. And I think I started telling this story last time, but there's a group of people that, and this one woman who's super nice and asked me about my family and how many kids I have, and she was like, you need to come out to my family's place. And I was then asking her about her family. How long has your family lived here? Uh, what do you guys do? And she's just being super polite. And we ended up like going to grab something to eat together, the group of us. And then we came back, and her friend pulled me aside, and she said, this it's you're adorably hilarious right now, but she's the princess. Like it was Princess Beatrice who, and I'm like asking this,
That's crazy.
I'm
Yeah.
asking her like about her family and how long they've lived in
That's
London.
like beyond celebrity
Oh,
status.
and
That's royalty. Yeah.
she's just like so kind about it, and I'm just falling on my face with everything that I say. But she was so kind, but um,
It's kind
probably
of
big
like a
regret that I didn't go out to the family's
so the
place.
family thing.
Yeah,
That's crazy. It's
yeah,
so. It's like they were like, "Oh, you're so cute. You're being so
yeah.
kind."
And I was like, I was focused. I was like, no, I'm here for like one reason. I'm not gonna go out, for the
Yeah.
weekend.
You knew why you were there.
Yeah, knew why I was there. And so we then go up, and I by this time, I had got to know his bodyguard, this guy named Mikey Arana.
Do you know if he's still his bodyguard? This guy.
He's not currently, but I know he works with a lot of other really
Hello.
big
Yeah.
people. And Mikey's one of my favorite humans. In fact, he was just in town doing security for someone that was performing here. Um,
Who's the someone?
I think it was Bad Bunny,
Oh
not
my
too long ago.
gosh. Okay.
Um, and he was also doing something for the opening of the Utah Jazz hockey team. So we went out to lunch and caught up. He'll be like a friend for life, but
That's
he
so
was such
cool.
a homie, and I and it was that relationship that really enabled me to sort of like hang around the hoop a little bit, because we went up to Manchester, and then we went to Birmingham as well, and it was after Birmingham that I was sort of hanging out backstage after a show, and Justin was just like, "Hey, will you ride with me?" Because we were going. I think it was like a 2-hour drive, where we were catching a flight somewhere. I can't remember even where we were going. My head was like so turned around
This
at this
was
point.
after England. This was after
Yeah,
London.
yeah.
Was it
After it was
Manchester?
Manchester or Birmingham. I think it was
Okay.
after the Birmingham show, and
So you've been there for how long in
so
London
I'd been
or
there
England?
probably like a week, 10 days now.
So you're just kind of like tagging along with
Yeah,
things.
exactly. Like, and I'm working my own hours on our stuff, kind of from there, and so and then every night we were sort of going out. So I
Is
remember
this
there was a week there where I swear I had like 8 hours of sleep because it was just like around the clock, and it was really fun. But I was just sort of like looking for that opportunity,
was that
and then
all your was that was your main focus? Was just like how these next days can I build a relationship to do these? Did you ever like get caught in the sauce where you're like, why am I even here? Like
for sure,
in England
for
for 10.
sure. I remember calling my business partner. It was like 2 a.m. there, and I'm like, man, I like maybe we just pull the ripcord and come back. And I was just like, well, I'll stay on a few more days.
Uh-huh.
And when we had that bus ride, I had been around enough, and he had seen me enough where I feel like he, in his own way, kind of vetted me a little bit. Because like I said, there's a million people that want their hands in
hmm
his pocket, and rightfully so, like pretty guarded. And immediately, like it's just me and him on the entire tour
Did
bus.
he I remember you briefly going through the story like did he like say something like, "Hey, I just want to sit with Shane" or something like that?
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
he kind of
Yeah, I
told the
kind
whole
of
crew.
told, yeah, the backup dancers like, hey, we're
And this was
just
a
taking
bus
the
ride to
bus.
where?
We were going up to Scotland.
Scotland.
Yeah, we were going up to Scotland, but I can't remember if we were going to like a private airport where we were then flying up
Mm-hmm.
or what it was. But this bus ride, it was just sort of like, he was just like, so tell me a little bit about your product, right? Tell me a little bit about this. And then he was just like, do you mind if we just like talk personally? Like, what do you believe in? Like, tell me about your
Wow.
family and really got vulnerable. I mean, both of us. And I mean, I remember there was one point where we're like, you know, teared and hugging in the middle of this like tour bus, and he shared some like really personal things about like finding God or finding God again and knowing that God loves him and the power that that's meant to him. And I think, you know,
Wow.
at the time, I don't know, you know, I think in these sort of circumstances, yeah, you've got to have some sort of credibility. You've got to be able to bring something of value to the table. And I felt like I had done that in my, you know, educational and professional life. But at this moment, it was just human, right? It was just really raw and human.
Because like I know he was like he talks about it like I think in 2020 he talked about like in an interview he's like it was so like he did the YouTube document he's like I was like waking up popping Molly
Totally.
rolling a joint and just every
Exactly. I
day
remember
just
he told me a story where he said, you know, I was in a really bad place using different things. You know, I had my team would have to check on me at night,
yeah
and I just wanted out of that. I just wanted more. And so I got on my knees that next morning. I said, God, if you're, you know, if you love me, help me just stay clean today. And he had the best day of his life. Like everything went right, and he didn't feel the need to do anything. And he was just like turned over a new leaf, and really kind of that influx of felt that influx of God's love in his life. And it was so powerful. I mean, I was like a mess listening to the story because
well he
it
probably
was
told a lot of things
yeah, I
yeah
mean, and I just gained so much like appreciation for like the human that he is because no, it's a hard life. You know, he was a celebrity at such a young age, basically living by himself,
and
and
then you hear about all these things now
yeah,
about like scary things that you're like people wonder why
totally.
like
And it's so easy to like throw stones at the Hollywood kid that's buying a monkey,
that
right?
peed in a bucket and you
Totally.
know like not even
Guess what I would do if I was 13 and had that kind of like money and access, right? I
it's
think we'd
not
all
he didn't even
make
do and that's
mistakes.
why I love him is because everyone like he never did anything really that bad like
Yeah.
it was never everything like but somehow they people and the social media everything made it so like Justin Bieber was this like oh my gosh this bad like there was nothing
Yeah.
in my opinion but like yeah it's crazy
Yeah, so we you know, we parked the bus and he's like, "Hey, would you like just kind of stay on tour with me for a little bit?" And so we ended up, you know, doing a few tour stops, and there was, you know, it was super fun in a lot of ways, but we spent time in Scotland, and then we were sort of remained really really connected after that.
hmm and then with that connection and then building in with the bubble obviously he invested I'm
Yeah.
assuming he invested um how did that build off of more I guess maybe relationships or the biggest lessons you learned from Justin and how that built kind of more of
Yeah.
you and your business
Yeah, it was interesting because probably 9 months later, 6 months later, actually pivoted the business. So we were doing a deep dive. My point is the celebrity relationships, other than the relationships themselves, like ceased to be being important to us because we didn't need celebrities to grow because we
hmm
switched to then selling because we did a deep dive in our data. We were always remain like really data driven and noticed that our users weren't who we thought they were, and they were a lot of like students at universities and businesses that were looking to for it as a team communication product.
hmm
And so we kind of pivoted where we are now selling to schools, selling to universities, and it was nice having these their names attached to it, but
hmm
we really didn't need them to grow. Uh, yeah.
was that like a hard pivot like did you kind of feel like a oh I kind of like that.
You
Like I kind of
know,
like the life of like maybe connecting with these guys, or do you feel like that wasn't
for
really?
me personally, like I love the pivot because it's a hard life. I mean, when you're in these kind of circles, you see how much effort everyone else is putting in the circle
Mm-hmm.
to like stay in the circle. And that
Mm-hmm.
was just a race that I didn't want to run
It's probably
forever.
exhausting
It
too.
was it was exhausting, and I really valued the personal relationship. I loved when like he would FaceTime to talk to my son about singing or performing, or we would randomly do like a snowboard trip somewhere and just be able to connect personally. But I didn't love like the rat race. And I knew that there were a lot of people around him where he was a really big business for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember on that first time on the bus, and I think, looking back, I think the reason why we connected was because I told him, I was like, I don't ever want you to feel like my hand's in your pocket. I want to give more to you than I take from you. And so I want you to call me if you ever need anything or want to talk through anything. But otherwise, like, don't don't feel any like pressure to do anything, right? And also at that time there was a lot of people pulling him in different directions,
Mm-hmm.
and here's a guy that I'm spiritual and have a family and I'm grounded and
Mm-hmm.
and um, have more of a normal life, and I think he appreciated that.
Do you ever like kind of miss? Because I remember you kind of briefly telling me that like when he had that new pastor and everything, he
Yeah,
kind of like rightfully so kind of cleared a lot of people
yeah.
out of his
I
life.
mean, first of all, like he would change his phone number every like couple months, and so it was
That is
always kind of like,
so scary though
yeah,
that you have to do that. Like as a
for sure.
human, you have to change your phone number all the
Yeah.
time, and
Yeah,
so
I
you
can't imagine.
so you kind of just slowly a little bit lost
Yeah,
touch, which
exactly.
is
Yeah, exactly.
probably
And
pretty
if I'm sure I'll see him at some point and give him a big hug. I'm
really
excited that he's a dad because he was always so great with my kids, and
Jack.
yeah,
They haven't shown him yet
I
that
know.
he hasn't been. I don't know if you've seen him. Have
I
you?
haven't. I haven't. Yeah.
No. That's yeah, so cool. That's like the most insane, most insane story that will ever be on this podcast. I can promise you. That's crazy. Now going forward, I guess like with questions about like obviously like your connections, your soft skills. What are kind of the main principles if you could narrow down, being a successful founder of businesses? I guess would you consider yourself an entrepreneur? Would that be
Yeah, for sure. I mean, anytime that you are starting your own business and raising money to do so, you're for sure an entrepreneur.
yeah?
Yeah.
What if you could narrow it down to like three principles of becoming a successful entrepreneur, a successful business person,
Yeah.
or a successful person in general? Like, what are
Yeah,
kind of those three principles that you
for
would?
sure. I think I'm just gonna kind of think through this live, but
No, you're
first and
good.
first and foremost, I think you've got to bring some sort of skill to the table, a very particular skill, whether you've got that in computer engineering or finance. You have to bring a skill that you're elite at, because you're only going to go as far as you've been willing to go personally. And so I think, if I'm ever looking for like a business partner on something, I want to make sure that they're bringing something elite, something
And
like
it's not just
tangible.
good. I like that you say elite. What's kind of the driving difference between someone that brings like a really good skill
Yeah.
versus someone that brings an
I mean,
elite
I've
skill?
got like a direct example in my own life, right? I talked on the last podcast about Move Networks. Move Networks was that it was a company where we were streaming online video.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why that ultimately failed is because the original engineering team that built the product was an elite, and the product was really buggy, and we had to end up doing a complete refactor of the code, which
Of
means you're
code.
completely rebuilding it. And so in my new one, with Bubble, which is now Pronto, when we brought on one of our co-founders, Ben Dolman, shout out Ben Dolman,
Mm-hmm.
he was a lead at what he had done. So he had won Apple's App of the Year award, Apple's Design Award. He had built a journaling app called Day One, which was really highly reviewed. And seeing our product and how it compared with some of the products that I had been involved with, I mean, the product still is elite. it's an elite product. And so you can only go as far when you're in software, as far as your product will go.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been something that has enabled us to go as far as we have and extend the runway as far as we have and open up new markets like we have because it is such a usable and well built piece of software. And so that's a direct example that I've seen from my own life between
Exactly.
like having
A
elite
good.
partners versus just a good partner. And so doing that diligence kind of right up front. The second thing, and the thing that I truly believe in, is like the people that you do something with is more important than the product that you're building or doing, right? It's the guys that you're going to be in the foxhole with on a day in and day out, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to make sure that these are good people that you want to be around and that you believe in, that you have a high amount of trust in.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, the real business is always undulate, right? And you have the peaks and the valleys. And when you're in a valley, it is really easy for the entire culture of the business to erode if you're not with people that you really trust and you want to stay in the foxhole with. And so that's been, and I've had examples on both ends of the spectrum where I've actually been involved with projects that were like really great projects with not so great people,
Mm-hmm.
and those didn't go well, and I didn't find personal enjoyment out of it because you end up spending so much time. It's kind of like that you know you are the makeup of your five friends or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
You become like the people that you do business with, and so you got to make sure that those are the type that's a direction that you want to head and not a direction that you don't want to head.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And that's kind of I relate to that a lot because it's like the grit. Like the grit's like people don't stay at the grit because of the commission. We're probably one of the lower commissions
Mhm.
actually. People don't stay at the grit because of we may like like there's further deeper reasons why the grit for me is so integrated in my life is because it's like a it's the people. It's
Yeah.
not pest control.
Yep.
We don't talk about pest control when we go to the grit. It's never like it's not even like we don't even talk about that. It's more about what you do together and what you're gonna build, and it's the people that you're with. So I really resonate with that. For you, I guess a third principle would be maybe a third one.
Yeah. The third one, I think the third one just comes down to doing your own personal work. I think we like to take snapshots of ourselves, and often we take a snapshot of ourselves and we're like, okay, I like what that looks like, and then we forget about doing any more work for
Mm-hmm.
like a year or two, and then you look back and say, I'm kind of the same person. I haven't really like continued to stretch myself. And today we're fortunate enough. I mean, we live in a world today where you can become anything that you want to become.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many voices out there that have incredible, top 5 ways to become a better salesperson, top
Mm-hmm.
3 ways to get more out of your morning. I mean, we can plug into basically any platform and learn and learn and learn. And so creating a framework for your life that allows you to grow in the way that you want to grow is extremely important. Again, it kind of comes back with just having that growth mindset that you want to be better, right? That
Mm-hmm.
you want to continue to grow either in your career or yourself. I feel like, my past 10 years of my life, I've done more growth personally than any other time in my life. And I feel like it's because I've had more of a growth mindset. I've been more attuned to, okay, what are the things around, what are the things that people around me are doing that I really like, or the way that, man, I saw the way that that guy treated that person. I wonder why. Like, what is it
Mm-hmm.
about that? Or I've noticed this person, or being a dad, right? My youngest son is the most grateful human I've ever been around, and watching him, I'll drop him off at football practice or whatever, and be like, Dad, man, thanks so much for bringing me to practice. I'm like, learned so much about the power of like keeping gratitude as like a staple in your life on a daily basis, a minute by minute basis, and just having gratitude for like the really little things, and which has in turn helped me become a more present person.
Mm-hmm.
And when I'm grateful and more present, I show up for everyone around me, right? Whether it's my wife or my kids or my business partners or anyone in my periphery. I just find myself showing up.
Wow. That's amazing. And it's so cool to like kind of grasp this idea of how important being present is and like mindful and but gratitude and how that relates together. And I think I guess a question I have too is like spirituality and business. I think a lot of people in the world kind of separate
Mm,
those two. But I've found in my short 25 years, I've found that the ones that are really successful involve spirituality with their business.
sure.
And where do you find that, like with you, as far as your spirituality with business?
Yeah, for sure. I think at the core, spirituality gives us purpose and hope. And I think purpose gives us that sort of North Star of where we want to head and the kind of person that we want to be. And whether that's, whether you're Christian and you're looking for, to be more Christ-like in your day-to-day life, like I am, um, it's been everything. It's really kind of that archetype of how can I continue to sort of refine my hard edges, of which I have a lot. And it's I think spirituality for me is a never ending thing. There's not like
Mm-hmm.
there's not a finish line.
Yeah.
I think that the work is the goal for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The process
Yeah.
instead of just the destination. And you feel like that directly relates to business.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think it goes back to what we were talking about before, where, in business, that third principle that we talked about, where just wanting to be better and show up in a better way personally, I think spirituality is like tied directly in there,
Mm-hmm.
and that should kind of be what the guiding principle of what you're working on a daily basis, or where you want to head, and what are the things that you want to accomplish, and what the I guess the why.
Which is exactly that's crazy you said the why, because that was like I kind of narrow the podcast episodes to a few last questions. And a lot of times one of my questions is maybe you've heard it because you're around the grit quite a bit,
Mm,
and maybe you've heard it, maybe not. But a huge thing that I believe in, it's like called the why triangle, and it's kind of made up of like three pillars. It's like your people, your dreams, and then like your revenge, in a
mm.
sense, like kind of keeping receipts of people that maybe have doubted you. If you were to kind of go through, I guess, briefly those three kind of principles, how would you describe those three
So
principles for
you've
you?
got your
Your
people.
people, your dreams, and then
Mm.
your revenge.
Yeah, I'll start with my people because that's the easiest one. I mean, it's my wife and kids, and actually my friendships. I am relationships to me are actually really really valuable, and I think that that's what maybe is the single biggest thing that I've learned in my career, is that yeah, the business and the money and that and all of that is great, but what I've really taken are these like relationships that are really invaluable to me. And so my people, my dreams is I think my dream is really to just keep getting better, is to not like stagnate. And I've different interests. I love my career and I love everything that we're doing there. I also have like a creative side that I want to keep exploring. Um,
What does that kind of look like? I'm interested
yeah,
in that, like genuinely, like
yeah,
because it seems as though you, financially probably and business wise, you're probably in a very comfortable state where it's not like you're like I need to grind every
mm.
day. You're still working every
Yeah. I
day.
still feel the grind. I
You still
still want to
you
grind.
want to grind, but
But there's another side of me that I've for sure especially over the last like 5 years, I finally kind of reached a point where it's like, okay, if I don't do this now, then when? I love to write. In the last little bit, I wrote my first screenplay.
wow.
So like an indie comedy. I'm not even sure what I'm gonna do with it yet, but it was just really cathartic to like produce something of my own
Hmm.
and get, words on paper. I love designing. I've always been into design and fashion. I've started designing clothes, and um,
Have you met Gabby from Akomi?
I have.
He's
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah, he's
So
great.
we're building right now. a hat for the podcast. Like
Okay.
actually, not just like a cheap
Yeah.
like not like a merchandise hat where you buy it from China and
Yeah.
print on.
Sure.
We've been working together for the last 4 weeks on every little detail and making sure, and it's fun.
It's so
It's
great.
cool, and I'm gonna give
It's
one
so
to you. Give
personal,
one.
right?
It's yeah, and
Yeah.
it's has my logo, and then it has quotes on the inside.
Yep.
It's the stitching, it's the netting, it's the shape, it's the fit. It's such a cool
Yeah.
world to kind of dive
Oh, I
into,
love
and it's
it.
just a hat. What are maybe like some things that you're kind of like thinking
Yeah.
about or designing?
Yeah. I've started a line. Everything that I've done so far has been one of one. And I've been into like vintage and thrifting for a long time now and really
Wow.
have
You know
stockpiled.
Elby Thrift Hood?
Yeah, of course.
He's one of my really good
Yeah.
friends. He's coming
Yeah.
on Saturday.
Oh, great.
I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
thrifting.
In
Yeah.
fact, I think my wife's helping him with a store design up in Salt Lake today, actually.
No
So,
way. Yeah, he
yeah.
just told me about how they're
Yeah.
opening up.
Yeah.
That world is my thing. So sorry, keep going.
Yeah. So everything, so I've been into thrifting and really I've stockpiled all of this like 1980s and
I need to
90s
see this, by the
um,
way.
denim that are like all like 501 denim
Oh
and then these
my.
like vintage flannels and then I follow so many like Japanese brands and I've been doing these one of one kimonos that are like these denim and flannel combinations that are really it's been fun. I mean I think they're cool. Like at the end of the day, I think Rick Rubin says you have to design for yourself. You have
For
to produce
yourself.
for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so ultimately, I'm making stuff that I want to wear and that I do wear, and
Mm-hmm.
then uh, trying to figure out the right way to monetize it and maybe do a storefront or something. But coming out with the line here soon,
I'm in.
landing on some
I'm in.
branding.
Whatever you
Yeah,
come out with, I'm in.
yeah,
I love that. That's cool. And I always notice, and I don't know if this has anything personal to it, but I always notice you have the longer necklaces
yeah.
and the longer. Is there meanings to these necklaces? Because
Yeah.
I've seen some really cool
Oh,
ones that you've
thanks.
worn with like some flannel. I'm very.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I remember
Cool.
all these things. Like what are the meanings of like those?
I mean, everything. I'm at the point in my life where everything has to have some sentimentality to it.
Mm-hmm.
I just want everything that I'm wearing or representing to have story in some way. And so these are like pieces that, we were in Mexico and I met this artisan that was making these amber necklaces and, got to know him and his story or just traveling and our home kind of reflects that. It's definitely a home where full of like found pieces that have just sort of been eclectic and we picked up here and there and I love that. I think that we are a story
It's
and I
true
want to
passion.
be able
Yeah.
to tell a story with kind of everything that I do.
Wow, that's awesome. Like, I couldn't relate even. I don't know if you knew that. I've been collecting shoes for 14 years.
Cool.
So like it's like even these like
Yeah.
I wanted these when I was 13. I finally found these like 2 weeks ago in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And so when I wear them, my nostalgia is thinking about the memory of driving to Calgary, trying to get them on my little phone, and I couldn't afford them. Like
Totally.
all these
Oh, I'm
every
the same
shoe.
way. Like I
Yeah.
remember
And
now
no one
going
gets it though. No,
totally.
no one, and it's kind of hard because it's hard to talk to people about fashion and design and shoes and sneakers because now the last 5, 6 years, it's really all about hype. It's all
Totally.
about looking cool and being cool. So when you
Yeah.
try to talk to someone about that, they're like, they don't
No,
get
it's
it.
it's story over everything for me. Of course, I need to like what it looks like, but
Hmm.
lately I found myself like thinking about the things that I wanted as a kid, like this these Andre Agassi shorts or these Bo Jackson shoes that I couldn't
Hmm.
get when I was
I
a
love the
kid.
bow. Yeah.
And just recent, like literally last week, I got these three concert posters delivered that I had rewound the clock and I remember us seeing like Pains of Being Pure at Heart in 2010 DC. Found the
That's
poster for
so
that
sick.
show,
I think
or
the exact
this
same. Yeah.
Devendra Banhart show that my wife and I went to in Boston in
Hmm.
2007. Like the literal poster from that show because that's what I want on my wall. I want my home to tell a
It's not for
story.
anyone else though. It's for
No,
you.
it's for me. Yeah, it's
It's
great.
so sick. Yeah, I just bought a pair
Yeah,
of like Jordan 14 four screens that I snuck into the men's locker room when I was 9 at my sister's high school basketball game. Found this pair and I was like, I
that's
could not, and I
amazing.
found that same pair in my
Totally.
size. That like
Yeah,
that stuff's
these products that connect you to these moments in your
and
life,
memories. Yeah,
and I think that's what it's all about.
that's cool. That's
Yeah,
really cool that you have that as kind of part of your dreams.
yeah.
And lastly, like revenge sounds harsh, but is there kind of like a revenge that you felt in the past or present of maybe
Yeah.
receipts that you've kept of maybe people that have doubted you or anything like that?
Yeah, nothing comes to mind. I think my revenge piece is a little bit with myself, if
Mm.
anything else. It's like proving to myself that I can do it, or remembering the doubts that I had about myself when I was younger, or even remembering versions of myself that maybe I didn't love.
Mm-hmm.
I think that might be the biggest one.
Is yourself.
Is, we all have these moments that we're not super proud of in life, and we're all going to collect those through life, and we can either make the decision to sort of, I guess, live with it, or actually try and flip it on its head, and get to a place where we can look back and be like, man, I can't believe I climbed that mountain. I can't believe I changed that about myself.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I thought was just so core that I didn't like about myself, and I changed it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think that that's it for me.
Cool. And then the last two questions. The last question is, as we wrap up 2024, I feel like there's always a principle that you take each year. Like you can go back each year and be like, that was like a huge thing I learned this year. What would be like the principle of 2024 that you kind of take away?
I think the power of presence this year. I've seen it more in my life, and I think that as I've become more present, I've been more grateful, and I've recognized more opportunities this year to serve and be of service to others
Mm-hmm.
than in any other time in my life. And I directly relate that with just being more present.
Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you being on here because I know you're busy. I know, like, I'm a
No, it's great.
random
Thank you.
25-year-old kid that you
I
met at your
love it. I
son's
love that you
football.
shot your shot.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah, I'm
mean?
at your.
As a guy that's had to shoot a shot, I really appreciate that. And
It,
I think what you're doing on here is
I
awesome.
appreciate. I've learned a lot, and this is for me, not for
Yeah.
anyone else. If no one watched this, I would write everything. I would
Yeah.
keep everything that you've. I've learned a lot, like to actually learn a ton. So I appreciate you because
Of
yeah, like
course.
I know you're busy, and I think this podcast will grow really big. But last question is, the podcast is named Grit and Grace. This is actually before I worked
Mm.
for the Grit.
Okay.
It's you got something on my feet.
Yeah.
It's tattooed on my leg.
Okay.
And I always ask each guest when they hear that phrase, "Grit and Grace," like what is like your thoughts when you hear that?
Yeah. I think, grit is just that core determination that allows you to go further than you would in other circumstances without it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I really value, especially as, you're looking for members of a team. I mean, that's like one of the biggest things is just how gritty are you? Like, are you going to run through this wall in
Mm-hmm.
order to solve this problem? And then grace is just something that we all need, and that we need to be willing to not only accept but give. And I think I've gotten better at that the older that I get. I think I was probably unfairly tough on people
Mm-hmm.
early on, and may have passed judgment a little quickly. And as I've received grace from others, I've learned to give it in more abundance, and that has just blessed my life. So, super grateful for that principle.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, once again, so
Yeah,
grateful for you,
thank
and
you.
and hopefully we can connect further. I'd love to connect with you like further with like
Yeah, of course.
clothing and
Yeah,
creativity
let's
and
do it
shoes. I would love that. So
for
thanks.
sure.
That's a wrap
Yeah.
for this episode.